Hey everyone, Quasimorph is finally out of early access. Version 1.0 is here, and if you are like me, you've probably died quite a few times trying to figure this game out. And honestly, there is no shame in that, because this roguelike shows no mercy to beginner mistakes. Every clone you lose means time, resources, and progress thrown down the drain. But after many hours testing builds, exploring ships, and facing that cosmic horror that only gets worse the deeper you go, I've put together 10 advanced tips that will completely change the way you play. If you've played a lot and feel like you're stuck, or if you're just starting out on version 1.0 and want a head start, these tips will save you a lot of frustration. I'm Matthew, and let's get straight to the point. This is one of the most painful lessons Quasimorph will teach you, and I learned it the hard way. Losing a mercenary with good gear just because I decided to open a door with my last action point. It sounds silly when you read it, but in the heat of the moment, with low AP and just wanting to finish exploring that room, it's easy to forget this rule and pay a heavy price for it. The problem is simple to understand. The moment you open the door or turn the corner, if there is an enemy right there, they act first. You don't have any AP left to shoot, retreat, or even raise your weapon. It's the difference between initiating combat with an advantage or simply getting executed before you even realize what happened. The solution is annoying, but it works. If you reached a door or a corner with only 1 AP in your pocket, hit the space bar and skip your turn. Yes, it's frustrating to stand still waiting to recover your points, but it's infinitely better than having to revive that character from scratch. Even in sneak mode, where interactions cost less, I recommend keeping this habit because it's not worth the risk just to save time. Quasimorph punishes rushing much more than caution. I know you feel the urge to advance quickly, especially when you already have a good run going, but this golden rule of the last AP is the kind of thing that separates those who survive multiple missions from those who keep restarting characters all the time. Cherish this tip, because it will save you more times than you can imagine. Look, this is one of those tactics that separates the ones who survive Quasimorph extraction missions from those who end up becoming just another dead clone in the pile. The corner ambush. The idea is simple, but brilliant. You position yourself exactly one tile away from a hidden corner, without hugging it. This way, you maintain partial vision of anyone coming around the bend and can react before the enemy understands what's going on. In a game where dying means losing everything you brought on the mission, that one tile advantage is literally the difference between extracting rich or returning empty-handed. This is where my favorite part of this tactic comes in, because it directly exploits the game's action point system. Most enemies operate with 2 APs per turn, and the game's system charges these points for movement, attack, and practically any action. When you stay one tile away from the corner, the enemy spends all of their points just to reach the corner and take that final step, stopping right in front of you, with no AP left to shoot. In other words, the guy walked all the way down the hall just to turn into an easy target at point-blank range. It's almost cruel, but Quasimorph has never been known for being generous to anyone. The fancy name for this is corner camping with doorway control, and this isn't just forum theory. The community guides and official wiki themselves recommend this exact type of play. Never turn a corner or open a door on your last AP. Let the enemy come to you, and use obstacles to force them to end their turn right next to you. Against low AP enemies, this works even better because they simply don't have the turn stamina to move and attack in the same round. I lost way too many clones ignoring this in the beginning, so learn from my pain. And to top off the combo, pair this position with sneak and the habit of examining the enemy. Walking stealthily gives you that detection advantage, and examining reveals the target's gear and APs, which is exactly the information you need to know if the ambush will work. If the guy has 2 APs and a dangerous weapon, you already know he'll stop in front of you stripped of actions. If he has 3 APs, then change the plan, because that one can move and shoot. Master this AP reading, and you'll turn every dark corridor in the game into a trap waiting to snap shut. If you want to extract more profit without turning your clone into a walking pack mule on the verge of death, you need to master the difference between the shuttle and the pod. The transport module, Shuttle, is your mobile warehouse. Use it right on the first floor of the mission to store spare armor and weapons you find. These items are saved even if you die later, so it's the perfect way to make sure your initial effort isn't wasted. The pod, on the other hand, is your emergency button for what really matters. Save it exclusively for ultra high-value items that pop up mid-mission. Rare artifacts, corporate data, elite gear. Calling the evacuation pod in the heat of the moment and sending it straight to the Magnum is the difference between returning rich or returning dead with nothing. It's literally turning risk into guaranteed profit. This division of functions is what separates those who play on autopilot from those who play with the meta in mind. The shuttle allows you to clear your inventory early, reduce weight, and maintain tactical mobility, while the pod becomes your life insurance policy for high-reward moments. You don't need to carry the world on your back. You just need to know what's worth protecting and when. Ultimately, this is one of the best meta progression tips you can apply right now in version 1.0. It completely alters the mission's risk economy. You stay aggressive, but with an intelligent safety net. And in the extraction genre, where every decision weighs heavily, this is what turns a lost run into a profitable campaign. If there's one thing that completely alters the course of your run, it's understanding that the game doesn't stand around waiting for you to evolve. Factions get more advanced over time, and suddenly that combat that used to be easy turns into a massacre because the enemies are now using much heavier weaponry. If you don't prepare from the very beginning, the game will simply swallow you whole. Therefore, a strategy I started using that made a huge difference was focusing on civil resistance right at the start. It might seem like a more basic faction, but that's precisely where the value lies. They drop extremely efficient physical armor in the early game. This gives you a solid foundation for survival without depending on luck or advanced loot. Meanwhile, instead of spending every valuable resource on site, the secret is to stockpile secret data and important items. These resources become currency down the road, especially with Ancom and Realware. And that's where the game flips. You start getting access to electromagnetic, silenced, and much more sophisticated weapons, which completely change the way you approach missions. What seems like just a route choice turns into practically a progression plan. Start with physical resistance to survive the initial chaos, then transition to advanced tech to dominate the mid and late game. It's the kind of strategy that isn't obvious at first, but once you get it, it feels like the game is finally starting to play in your favor. Version 1.0 completely overhauled the fire, liquid, and gas systems, so nothing is just decorative scenery anymore. Everything turns into a weapon or a trap. When you see one of these barrels in your path, left-click to drain it and leave the fluid spilled on the ground. It sounds like a waste of time, but trust me, this prevents a stray shot or a random grenade from turning the entire environment into a fire zone or chemical burn hazard in the middle of combat. Here is the painful part to remember. I lost entire clones covered in flames because of a single barrel I ignored. Quasimorph's environmental damage system is punishing to the absolute maximum, and when a barrel explodes, it not only deals massive damage but also leaves your character in a critical state with continuous burn effects. In an extraction genre where dying means losing everything you looted, this prevention is the difference between extracting rich and returning naked to the ship. Version 1.0 made this even more lethal, so don't underestimate the power of a simple preventive click. The mechanic is simple, but many players ignore it because they're solely focused on loot and the extraction route. The game lets you interact with barrels and drain their contents before combat, and this is an advanced quality-of-life tool that separates experienced players from novices. Instead of risking an enemy using the barrel against you or a stray shot detonating everything, you simply remove the danger before it even exists. It's one of those small actions that saves you a lot of headaches and lost clones. The best part is that this tactic fits perfectly into Quasimorph's gameplay philosophy: environmental control and risk anticipation. The entire game punishes you for being impulsive, and draining barrels is just another layer of that defensive mindset you need to develop. Next time you see a fuel or acid barrel in your path, don't think twice. Drain it, clear the ground, and advance knowing at least one more potential trap has been neutralized. One of the things that kills you the most isn't the enemy itself, it's ignorance about how elemental damage works. Carrying water or canned drinks on your belt sounds silly until you take a flamethrower blast or an energy beam. At that moment, using the right item puts out the fire on your clone instantly and saves you from burning to death or continuous damage. It's cheap insurance that takes up little space and keeps you alive. In the heat of combat, you can't guess. You need to check. Right-clicking on enemies to see their exact resistances is mandatory, especially in the mid and late game. Robots and cyborgs ignore almost all pierce and fire damage, so spending ammo or wrong attacks on them is literally a waste of turns and resources. That's where the trick comes in. Against these machines, slashing weapons like machetes and axes are devastating. They shred the metal shell in a way that piercing and fire just can't. Knowing this turns an enemy that seemed immortal into something you can take down in a few well-placed strikes. This tip is all about information control and preparation. If you master the use of water, drinks for countermeasures, and learn to read resistances before attacking, your clone stops being a hostage to RNG and becomes someone who dictates the fight. In an extraction game where every mistake can cost you everything, this is what separates those who survive from those who become just another piled-up body. This is one of those tips that seem obvious, until the game punishes you for ignoring it. In Quasimorph 1.0, you can no longer head out with a loadout focused on a single damage type and expect it to solve everything. I've fallen into this trap of putting together a perfect setup on paper, only to arrive at a station and realize my shots simply weren't doing anything. The game practically gives you the answer, but lots of people ignore it. Right-click on the enemies. Right there you'll see resistance, armor type, the weapon they use, and even their status. This completely changes how you enter combat. When you start reading this info, you stop playing in the dark and start making much smarter decisions. In the mid-game, this gets even more critical, because factions start mixing everything up. Rifles, shotguns, flamethrowers, heavy enemies, and especially robots. And robots are a great example of the problem. They often resist pierce, blunt, and fire, but are vulnerable to slash. If you entered the mission with only the wrong weapon, you're done for. It's not about skill, it's about preparation. That's why I always carry at least 2 damage types. It could be a rifle with a slashing sidearm, or a shotgun with something focused on piercing, even a melee weapon as backup. Version 1.0 greatly expanded these possibilities with hybrid and composite weapons, so there's no excuse to stay locked into a single style. Here, survival isn't about having the best weapon, it's about having the right weapon for the right enemy. If you want to master Quasimorph in version 1.0, you need to treat stances as more than just movement buttons. They are your primary survival tool. The whole game revolves around managing your action points, and each stance has a specific cost and purpose that completely changes how you play. Sneak costs 1 AP per tile, but gives you wall sense, free interactions, and open doors without spending anything. It's the stance you use to explore areas you haven't cleared yet, open doors safely, and feel out what's on the other side before exposing yourself. Walk is your neutral stance, costing 2 APs per movement, and you use it in hallways you already know are clear. It has no special advantage, but it also doesn't have the accuracy penalty of sprint. Sprint, on the other hand, is your emergency stance or quick movement in safe territory. It costs 3 APs, hits you with a nasty accuracy penalty, and even locks your inventory and door interactions. In other words, you only sprint when you already know the path is clear, or when you need to flee desperately. Using sprint to explore is pure suicide. Now comes the golden rule I learned the hard way. Never, ever open a door or peek through a doorway, leaving 0 AP remaining. Quasimorph's turn system brutally punishes anyone who does this, because if you open a door and run out of AP, any enemy on the other side acts before you have a chance to react. It's literally dying for free. The right way is to open and sneak, spending 0 AP on the door, but keeping at least 1 or 2 APs in reserve, to retreat, shoot, or reposition if things go sideways. This mindset of always keeping reserve AP is what separates players who survive from those who pile up dead clones. Version 1.0 greatly refined the AP and stance system, so every movement carries weight and consequence. When you internalize that sneak is for exploring, walk is for transiting, and sprint is only for emergencies, and that you never end a turn without AP when opening something, you stop dying stupidly and start controlling the combat rhythm. In the mid-game, the difference between returning rich and becoming a statistic often lies in how you use a simple door. Doorway kiting, controlling combat through the threshold of a doorway, is the most consistent technique you can master. Open in stealth mode, examine the environment, and force the enemy to come to you, one at a time. This way, you turn a 3v1 ambush into a sequence of 1 versus 1 duels where you dictate the pace. The secret is never to run headfirst into an uncleared room. Sprinting inside is an invitation to take 3 attacks at once, get flanked, and lose control of the turn. Instead, fight right on the doorway line, where only a single enemy can reach you at a time. This levels the playing field in your favor and gives you room to heal, reload, or reposition without excessive pressure. When the pain ramps up, or you realize a flank is coming, retreat just enough to break line of sight. This makes enemies lose their turn or spend action searching for you while you recover. It's a simple but brutally efficient cycle. Lure, eliminate, retreat, repeat. That is the essence of doorway kiting. Tactical patience and space control. In the mid-game, where resources are still limited and clones die easily, this technique allows you to clear entire areas without relying on luck. Those who master this stop reacting to chaos and start imposing their own logic on combat. The game got much stricter regarding economy and progression, and the best thing I did was choose one or two factions to truly focus on, especially considering power and technology. When you centralize your decisions, everything starts flowing better, from contracts to access to more advanced gear. The trade shuttle also changed a lot, and ignoring that is basically playing against yourself. Now, it's not just about selling random items. There's a whole logic of trading by category, reputation, and even using proxies to manage cargo. Once you understand this system, you start extracting way more value from every run instead of just returning with loot and selling it on autopilot. Another thing many people underestimate are ritual missions. They are absurdly useful for reducing the power and technology of enemy factions, which in practice slows down that snowball effect where everything starts getting harder. And there are also defense and control missions, which are pure gold. The Quasimorphosis meter is locked at 0, so you can play much more aggressively without fear of turning the run into complete chaos. And to wrap it up, progression now heavily relies on intelligent resource management. Clone upgrades are more restricted because of chips, so you need to prioritize what really matters. At the same time, crafting your own meds and ammo at the Magnum went from being optional to an essential part of survival. In the end, it's not just about shooting well, it's about knowing how to invest every resource as if your run depended on it, because it actually does.